It's a great honor to be here tonight. I have to say that I became a bit of a nervous wreck listening to Adam's talk, and it's wonderful to know you survived the ordeal and the blue suit and the melting and all of that. And I'm going to tell you a very different kind of story tonight. I'm going to tell you about an ad, a television ad, that when I was growing up really defined for me, for an embarrassingly long period of time, what I thought my life was going to be like. So the ad that I'm going to tell you about was for Charlie Perfume. And it debuted in 1973. And if you are of a certain age and still sentient, you remember this ad. The ad was for this perfume called Charlie. And Charlie Perfume went on to become one of the most successful commercial introductions of all time. And it wasn't because the perfume was particularly good. In fact, the perfume's kind of horrible. I know that because people keep sending it to me. And it's now very old, horrible perfume, and it hasn't gotten better. But even though the perfume was rather horrible, the ad is brilliant. Because the ad captured, in a very, very simple way, what it meant, at least in 1973, to be a modern, successful woman. So the ad is very simple. It's just a picture of this gorgeous woman. It was Shelley Hack, who was one of the best models of that era. And she's just sort of striding off into the future in this ad. And the words Charlie are just emblazoned across it. And there's only 3 other words on the entire page, written in very small typeface down at the bottom. But they're good words. The words just say simply, gorgeous, sexy, young. These are good things. You read this ad and you say, yes, I want those. And what does it mean in 1973, according to Charlie, to be gorgeous, sexy, and young? Well, the ad hints very strongly it means being a working woman. Now, in retrospect, this kind of makes a lot of sense. Because 1973, again in retrospect, turns out to have been really the height of the feminist movement. This was the era when, for the first time in history, girls like me, I was born in 63, so I was 10 when the ad came out, girls like me were being told, you can be whatever you want. This was the first time girls had heard this. Our mothers hadn't heard this. Our grandmothers certainly hadn't heard this. Our grandmothers heard you should be pretty, get married, and have babies. We were being told you can be whatever you want. And to make it even worse or better, our mothers were saying to us, well, I couldn't be a lawyer, but you should. I couldn't be a neuroscientist, but you can. This was the era, true story, when Barbie briefly became an astronaut. She did. Now, one shudders to think of the effect of zero gravity on that doll's body, but we'll save that for another day. Because it was Charlie who affected me. And it was Charlie that really set out this image of what I thought a working woman's life was supposed to be about. And what was that vision that I, and I'm pretty sure millions of other little girls had in my head? Well, what did it mean to be a successful working woman? Well, remember those first 3 words again. It meant you were gorgeous, sexy, and young. It meant that you had fabulous hair all the time. And it meant, even though Charlie herself was wearing a pantsuit, it meant being fashionable, because this was the era when pantsuits were really quite fashionable. And very importantly, but very subtly, it meant you went to work. Now, the ad never says successful women go to work, but it hints at this very, very powerfully. And the hint we have, and I'm hoping some of you remember this ad, is that Charlie is carrying a briefcase. Now, it is not a heavy briefcase. It is not a briefcase that makes you worry that she is concerned about the PowerPoint presentation that she has to deliver that afternoon. It is not a briefcase that makes you think that she's worried about her relationship with her boss. It's just a briefcase. And she's going off to work, and you know it's going to end well. And in other versions of this ad, particularly the television versions that came out, true story, she's got a briefcase in one hand and a baby in the other. A beautiful blonde child. And once again, you don't look at that ad and say, I wonder if that child has substandard daycare. I wonder if perhaps that child is 104 and her mother is not taking care of her. No, you just know she's going to work and she's got a baby and it's all going to turn out just fine. And in fact, it does in the ad, because at the end of the ad, you see her walking into a bar. And there's no briefcase anymore, and there's no baby anymore. And we don't know what's happened. But she's going into a bar, and men are dancing with her, and Bobby Short shows up and sings at her and squirts her with perfume. And I thought this was going to be my life. And I may have been foolish and naive, I'm sure I was, but I wasn't alone in this belief, and Charlie wasn't alone in creating this myth, because in 1973, this idea was everywhere. The other big perfume was Enjoli, and that ad, literally, she comes home in a dress like this carrying a frying pan and says, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man. This is what we were being bombarded with. This was the era when television was full of all these perky career women, Alice and Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda. This was the era when television was epitomized by Charlie's Angels. Now, these were working women, the Angels. These were women whose day-to-day job involved ridding the world of evil. They had a boss who was an invisible man you never actually see. And they go to work in bikinis. Now, I knew this wasn't real, but not really. And part of me sort of presumed that if I worked hard and I did well in school and I figured out how to straighten my hair, that I too could sort of go off into this world where it appeared all women had marriages and babies and briefcases and sex and shoes and perfume. And I really did think we could have it all. And then it turned out to be oh so not true. And I had my own Charlie moment, that moment of the baby and briefcase, some short 25 years later. But my Charlie moment didn't occur in a bar. And sadly, there was no gorgeous men crooning at me. My Charlie moment occurred in the ladies' bathroom at LaGuardia Airport, where I was wrestling with a breast pump, certainly the least sexy instrument ever created by humankind. I was racked by guilt of leaving my 3-week-old son behind, and I was desperately trying to close the business suit over my very postpartum body, and it wasn't working. This was the moment in which I realized that I really was having it all, and it really wasn't all that fun in any way. So fast forward, I'm a lot older now, and I hope a little bit wiser. The good news is that I've realized that Charlie never existed at all. And if she had been, she would have been killed instantly by a jealous mob composed of the rest of us. I've come to realize, too, that perfection doesn't exist, and that I will never, ever successfully make anything in the pages of Real Simple magazine. And I suspect I'm not alone in this. There's nothing real simple in that magazine. Everything in that magazine takes you 4 hours, and it doesn't look anything like what the pictures suggest. So I have given up. My children are long since past the days of strollers and breast pumps. They've moved on to mountain bikes and beer pong. You know who you are, and I don't approve. But I have come to realize that none of us has perfect lives, and that no one, no man, no woman, no child, no human has it all. But there are moments still when I sort of harbor this fantasy of Charlie. And I hope that somehow we baby boomers are able to reincarnate a new version of Charlie, a new Charlie ad that we will, I presume, now read on our smartphones instead, probably squinting because we still can't give in and buy reading glasses. But this new Charlie, or Charlotte, or Charlene, will look different. She'll be a bit older. She might even have a few wrinkles, even in this city. She might have a little bit of gray hair. Maybe there's some dirty dishes in the background. Maybe even there's a very badly behaving grandchild screaming somewhere. And she won't be perfect, this Charlie, I imagine, but she'll be real. Thank you.